What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run two programs called Inner Knowing and Good Life Designed for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals on tools and frameworks for creating an intuitive practice and for creating self mastery in their life. As someone who's helped countless entrepreneurs open doors of possibility that they never thought existed, I've seen these strategies transform people's lives. The best part is that you'll 10x your output, unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly to overcome your limiting beliefs. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition, and set a new framework on how to live your best life. And you'll get access to guided meditations that I have personally created that are not available anywhere else. We'll create a new self-concept that you can practice moving forward. This method is so effective that even if you don't have a lot of time or if you think you're not ready for a change, these frameworks and methodologies will still work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can also check out what some of the previous clients had to say about our time together. It's first come, first serve, and I hope to see you there. Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, spirituality, and consciousness. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with David Passiak. He's the founder and CEO of Flow Coach, and at Flow Coach, David is pioneering a new approach to flow called subconscious fitness, which is based on his Ph.D. research at Princeton on comparative mysticism, 4 books, and nearly 30 years of personal practice experience. David is passionate about the balance between exponential innovation and traditional conceptions of community and wisdom, and he spent most of the last 12 years traveling internationally and giving talks and workshops across the 50 countries. He also believes that exponential innovation and AI will be a catalyst for a great awakening and massive transformation of consciousness within our lifetimes. And I'm so excited to welcome David to the show. So welcome to the show, David.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, David, to kick it off, what is the importance of our subconscious mind? And for those who are listening in who may not understand what that term even is, can you first define it?
Sure. So we can think of the subconscious as basically the part of ourselves that is making decisions on our behalf, maybe outside of or behind or below our conscious awareness. So we should think of the subconscious then, I would say, also not just in terms of our mind, but also in relationship to our nervous system, to our heart center, our breathing, to your gut, to all these different aspects or dimensions of ourselves. So on an average day, people they'll have about 60,000 thoughts, and a lot of those thoughts are happening automatically. So, for example, someone will wake up in the morning, and then they often, check their phone, and then they're going and having the same thing to eat, and then they're taking the same path, going to work, and then they're going through the same kind of automatic behaviors. And there's a way in which a lot of these things are happening, and they're just kind of happening automatically. We're not giving a lot of conscious thought to them. Also, what's happening at a subconscious level is your mind is layering an interpretation or a meaning on top of your experience. So, for example, if you are to, let's say you look at words on a page, you can't not see those words. You can't stop your mind from turning a sentence and layering an interpretation on that, right? You can't look at it and just see only kind of garbled text, for example. So there's this constant layering of meaning and interpretations on top of reality. Now, I should say that biologically, we are programmed to be risk averse. We're programmed to avoid things that might do us harm. And a lot of times you tend to remember the things that happen negative versus the positive. So you can think, for example, of like when let's say you may go to a restaurant 99 times and you have amazing experiences every time. And then you have one negative experience. A lot of times you will then go and tell all of your friends about that negative experience, or you may write a negative review. So there's this kind of inherent subconscious bias towards negativity. Now, the thing that's why this is important is also that a lot of society is optimized around manipulating this aspect of or dimension of being human of our subconscious, these tendencies. So you can think, for example, of all of the negative ads that tend to happen around around elections. You can think of when you watch the news. There's lots of stuff around. They often say if it bleeds, it leads. There's a tendency to show lots of violence, lots of polarization, because that invokes this type of reaction at a subconscious level. We tend to be oftentimes motivated by fear, by anxiety, by this sense of kind of deep insecurity, this need to protect ourselves. And I personally believe that this is a huge problem, and it's a problem that a lot of people are not aware of. This way in which there's so many things that are happening externally that are impacting who we are, impacting all of these decisions that are made at a subconscious level. People tend to have this belief that they are free, that they are acting out of free will and free choice, but a lot of times there's so much external pressure happening, so many things from devices and constantly being online, and the sense of having to kind of have control over your sense of a digital self, and all these types of things, that is this constant change that is happening in the external world, and that has a deep impact on us at a subconscious level. And so we need to figure out, when we talk about the subconscious, it can sound like a kind of esoteric concept, because you think, oh, the subconscious, that's below my conscious awareness. Well, if it's below my conscious awareness, why should I worry about it? But actually, you can learn how to make these things conscious. You can learn how to train your brain to not be reactionary. You can learn how to get more control over your heart center and your breathing and your nervous system. So there's ways in which we can proactively train our subconscious, and this is a thing that I'm especially passionate about.
So, thank you so much for that incredibly detailed explanation about the subconscious mind, David. I
Hmm.
think that a lot of people, like you said, we're sort of getting all these, millions of impressions all day long from the media, social media, different constructs of reality. And so it does sort of become difficult as a human being living on this earth to make conscious choices with especially the subconscious programming that we've inherited. So how you said that you have developed some techniques and tools to help people develop ways that they can protect their subconscious or maybe evolve their subconscious, and I'd love to hear from you. What are some of those techniques?
Sure. So when I think about the subconscious and the different types of things that I just mentioned, I think that there are different dimensions of our subconscious, and they correspond to what you might call different energy centers in the body. So first, let's think of your heart center. So when you think of the things that are the most important to you, the things that are really you're most passionate about, your family, your loved ones, the things that you really care about, right? You feel this kind of warmth and illumination in your heart, right? You feel it right in your heart center. And what's interesting is that your heart center is directly connected with your breathing. So, for example, you may have had an experience where you've had a lot of panic or anxiety, and your breathing starts to get faster, right? People right, you hear people breathing like this when they get really kind of anxious. um, Oftentimes people might even faint because they start breathing so fast. When you're breathing so fast, you're actually not getting as much oxygen in your body. So what's interesting about the subconscious, in terms of you think of our heart center, you can't just immediately say, I don't want to be angry anymore, or I don't want to have anxiety. You can't just consciously make those feelings go away. But what you can do is, because your breathing patterns mirror your emotions, you can start to take slow, deep, relaxing breathing. And when you do slow, deep, relaxing breathing, that you're starting to you're triggering what's called a relaxation response in the body. So, for example, two practices. So, for example, you can think of what's called the physiological sigh. So, physiological sigh. I can demonstrate this on audio only. You're taking two short breaths. That's an example of a practice that would impact you physiologically at a subconscious level. So what's happening when you do that, your body naturally sighs about every 5 minutes. And when you're doing the two quick breaths and the low deep exhale, you're releasing tension. And there's a way in which you slowly start to calm down. And as you calm down, you're able to influence your emotions. You're able to influence your anxiety. And you could also do more prolonged breathing if you're feeling anxious or frustrated. Another example would be what's called 4-7-8 breathing. So 4-7-8 breathing, it was a practice originated by Dr. Andrew Weil. He refers to it as a tranquilizer for the nervous system. So 4-7-8 breathing is you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 7 seconds, and then you breathe out for 8 seconds. And as you do that, you're breathing at about a ratio of 2-to-1. You're breathing in slowly for 4 seconds and exhale for hold it and then exhale for 8 seconds. As you do that, you're triggering a relaxation response in your body. So those are two examples of practices that you can do in terms of subconscious fitness that just impact you in quickly in 1 to 5 minutes. Now we can think of, as I said before, there are different energy centers in the body. There's also the energy center of your core or your gut, and so that is in the body. One practice that you can do to if you want to raise your confidence or to feel more kind of courageous and focused in front of a large audience, you can do a standing power pose. So a standing power pose is where you would stand up and you would put your arms to your waist and kind of puff out your chest. You think of power pose; it's a biological type of response that you see in like gorillas and different types of primates. When you do that for just 2 minutes, you increase the perceived confidence in your audience by 20%. So literally, people will believe that you are more confident. You are more kind of courageous and focused by doing that practice for just 2 minutes, because physiologically you're triggering all these types of reactions in your body at a subconscious level. So it's really fascinating that there's these simple practices that we can do to become more relaxed, to have more, to kind of let go of tension, to appear more confident and focused. And then a third practice, if you think of moving from the heart and the body into your mind, into your pineal gland, the prefrontal cortex, when you think about the future, when you think about all the possibilities that lay out in front of you, then you can feel energetically, you can feel kind of like your head start to light up. And there's very simple practices that you can do around that to connect with a kind of universal energy or universal source. So what I've done with subconscious fitness is I've started to look at these different physiological or energetic centers in the body and start to think through how can we teach them to people in a way that they can navigate through life to take back more control from all these different types of external triggers.
Okay, wow. So you said a lot of different techniques, from breath work to the power pose to more. And, I think that these are also so practical that people can actually integrate into their daily life. I think one thing I've noticed is that there's oftentimes, different tools, but it becomes such a labor to have to get
Yeah.
into kind of a good flow state. So I love that these are simple and easy to do. So you talked about why you created this, and have you put it into practice, and what has been some of the outcome of the results from this system?
Sure. So um, I first started my practice when I was 19, and I'm 48 now. So it's been nearly 30 years. And when I first started my practice, I started it because conventional approaches to healing weren't working for me. I had terrible panic and anxiety attacks to the point where I couldn't leave my house. Around the same time, my younger sister and only sibling committed suicide. I had a lot of unprocessed trauma from growing up, from relationship with my father, and all these different. And I knew at a really deep level that I didn't want to take drugs and just try and numb away the pain. I didn't want to do things that were treating the symptoms. I wanted to really understand what was going on at an underlying fundamental level that was causing me to feel so anxious and to the point and have these panic attacks to the point where I couldn't leave the house. And around that's when I just first discovered meditation and breath work and mindfulness. And the over the next 10 years, I had a tremendous transformation. I really dedicated my heart to these practices. Going on, I returned to school. I got perfect grades. I went from a BA to then pursue a master's degree at Arizona State in religious studies, then went on to pursue PhD studies at Princeton. And in going through all of those I went through a complete transformation to the point where now I can speak on stage in front of thousands of people. But what I found in terms of thinking about the subconscious fitness as a system was that as I started to progress in my practice, I started to learn that I could do different practices and achieve different types of benefits or outcomes. So, for example, when I would be traveling and speaking on stage, there were times where I was going to 20 to 25 countries a year. I was kind of experimenting with a nomadic lifestyle. And when I was constantly traveling and going to new locations, I would do more body center practices. I would do the types of practices so that when I go on stage, I can feel confident and focused. So I would do practices to raise my awareness, to be more confident, to feel like I have this kind of protective, energetic field around me. So that standing power pose meditation that I mentioned in the beginning is one example of that. Then, when I was doing more things related to relationships, to emotional intelligence, when I had to do client work, when I really needed to do kind of empathetic listening and really understand, okay, what are the problems that my clients are having? How can I best serve them? Then I would do more heart center practices. So I would do practices like loving kindness and mindfulness meditation, yoga nidra, these different types of practices. And these are more practices to open up your heart center, to have more empathetic listening. And then when I was doing things like thinking about the future, I've written 4 books on the future and innovation and possibilities. Then I would do more mind center practices. And so I found that I went through all of these different types of transformations, and I started to intuitively adapt my practice based upon what was going on in my life. And when COVID happened, I ended up getting very sick. I didn't get sick with COVID, but at the time I was in Thailand. I was living in Bangkok, and I had all sorts of problems with my digestive system to the point where I couldn't really eat without severe pain. I was in bed for about 3 months. And the doctors were telling me that I was going to need surgery. I was going to have to take all these pharmaceutical medications for the rest of my life. And I always believed in the incredible healing power of the body. And so I rejected all of that advice, and I started doing all of these really deep practices and went through a huge transformation. And I made a decision when I was going through when I was going through that transformation, that when I got through it, I would formally systematize and teach these practices. And so that ultimately led to creating the subconscious fitness system.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, David. It's really incredible to hear about all the ways that you are connecting with certain pieces of yourself in order to access these different states of awareness and consciousness. And I think a lot of people usually have one category that they go deep in. But I love that you talked about connecting with your heart, connecting with your mind, doing the embodiment practice, the power pose, and what that meant for what you wanted to accomplish for in your life. Like, so that to me feels
Yeah,
really important because I think, different modalities are very different for, what people want the outcome to be. And so it's really cool that you have developed, an idea of, and not only an idea, but like a system and a process for how to almost like diagnose people and give them what would serve them best for this moment in time that they're in.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to pick up on that and say that so there we are multidimensional beings. A lot of times today, I think there's this type of talk where people say, "Okay, you have to be your authentic self," and I believe that. But also, I think that a lot of times when people say you have to be your authentic self, there's this kind of there's a kind of misperception that somehow you are the same person in all aspects of your life. And I actually think there are these different dimensions of who we are. So the way that I've organized the subconscious fitness system is I've organized it around four different universal archetypes. So you can think of the first one would be the sovereign or the king or queen. So when you think of being a sovereign, when you think of being a king or queen in your life, this is like an executive role. This is like a leadership role. This is your decision making, right? And so when you think of being a sovereign or a king or queen, well, you want to be in control, a sense of control in any situation. You don't want to feel triggered. You don't want to feel reactionary. You want to be able to feel like you can make informed decisions. To feel like you're the one making decisions. You're not just kind of constantly responding to things around you. So under the sovereign, under the king or queen archetype, I teach these 1 to 5 minute, very short practices that are mostly targeting your nervous system and your amygdala, your center for fight or flight. So that way, when you think of, okay, I need to be in control, you think of being a king or queen, you can do these types of practices. Then you think of the lover. So when you think of being a lover, when you think of caring for people, of emotional intelligence, those are more heart-centered practices. When you want to cultivate self-care and empathy and compassion and connect with the people around you. Then the next one would be the magician or the wizard. So when you think of being a magician, when you start, you can feel your energy shift from your heart center into your mind and kind of illuminating your mind. You're thinking about the future and possibilities and storytelling and stuff like that. And then the last one would be the warrior. So when you think of being a warrior, you think of kind of going out and facing the unknown and dealing with all types of uncertainty. Now, what's interesting about these archetypes, these four archetypes, is these four archetypes also relate to different roles in organizations or companies. So the king or queen, the sovereign, right? That's like a CEO. The product team is in many ways the heart of every organization. So when you think of, a company exists to create products to solve people's problems, right? That's like your heart center. Then you think of doing storytelling and thinking about the future and relationships and things like that. that's related to marketing. And then when you think of going out and, I have to make sales, I have to meet people, I have to kind of, go out into the unknown. That's like the warrior. So there's a way in which these four archetypes also relate to different types of roles that people play in their professional lives. So my goal then in teaching this system is to empower people to make informed decisions about their practices, to try and develop different aspects of who they are based upon what's going on in their life.
So cool. That's awesome. I love that archetypal construct. It makes a lot of sense. Wow. Very interesting. So, David, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the
Sure.
idea of empathy, because I know that you spent a lot of years, I believe, talking about empathy. And so I'd love to understand, what is empathy in your perspective and why is it important to understand? And then we can talk a little bit about how empathy is important when it comes to work and relationships.
Sure. So yeah, I started a group called Empathy Flow. I also did organized a conference with over 40 different leaders on empathy. I did that during the first year of the pandemic. So if we go back to what we were talking about earlier about the subconscious and about people constantly being sort of polarized and having you know when the world gets increasingly polarized, and we're constantly making different types of value judgments upon people, a lot of times there are things that are happening at a subconscious level that we're not really aware of. And so when I think of empathy is really about trying to understand on a deeper level the pain points, the struggles, the types of motivations that other people have. And I think this is incredibly important because we live in a multicultural, interconnected world. There's so much, things are just constantly moving in a million different directions. And it is very easy for us to kind of get into our kind of own filter bubbles. This is one of the problems with algorithms, especially. Your social media, the different types of content that people consume. It's always just showing you things that you like. It's showing you things that confirm your own biases, and we really need to do our best to be mindful of that and to resist that. And we do that by cultivating empathy. We do that by really the types of heart center practices that I mentioned earlier, as well as doing things like having engaging in dialogue. Really, because as the world is just going to keep getting more exponentially faster and faster and faster. And I truly believe that the key to success in the future is when there's all this external change outside of us, we need to connect with our heart center and the things that are most human. And we do that through empathy. We do that through cultivating a deeper sense of understanding of the people around us.
Right. And David, what does that mean for folks who are at work and might be experiencing difficulties and empathy? I've noticed this is sort of anecdotal, but I've noticed that people who are
Hmm.
very successful from an analytical, logical perspective, like they've done really well in the business world, their empathetic intelligence, put it that way, feels like
Hmm.
quite behind. And so, yeah, I'm wondering if, what have you seen when it comes to that dynamic, and how would you coach people in a work setting to develop more empathy, especially in teams?
Well, first, I think it's important to check in with people, to ask how they're feeling. It's important to understand people's motivations. I also think it's helpful to understand people's specific roles and what are most important to them. So you think within a workplace, for example. So a lot of my work was done in working with early stage startups and helping startups to scale their teams faster and faster. And so if you go back to the different archetypes that I mentioned earlier, one of the big problems that you see within teams is a lot of times the salespeople are often the people that are the most that are interacting the most with customers or with clients. I would say the salespeople and the customer service people, right? They're the ones who are talking to people on a daily basis, and those people are giving them valuable feedback. But a lot of times, that feedback is not given to the product team. And a lot of times, also, what happens is salespeople will, or they don't know how to do that. And at the same time, the product team, their biggest concern is how can I create something that is stable, that's going to solve problems in a way that scales, right? So if you're creating a product, you want to make sure that that product serves the needs of everyone that uses it. And so when you think of empathy, then that person needs to understand, okay, how does if someone from sales or some other team says, hey, you know what, we have to build this, we have to do this, the product person is going to say, okay, well, why are we doing that? They're going to ask very specific questions about the use cases. They're going to need to understand, okay, why would we want to build that for someone? Because maybe this one feature that you want would actually impact the entire product, and it might impact other customer segments in a way that would be problematic. So there's all these different types of, like, I would say, communication dynamics that people need to understand in a team environment. What is the most important thing to me as a person? What is the most important thing to my particular part of the company? What role do I play? And I think the more that you understand that, um, and the way that people need to communicate, the better your team can function as a whole. And a lot of that has to do with empathy. It has to do with understanding, okay, this is the product people have these particular needs, then they have these particular ways in which you should communicate with them. And if you respect that, they will develop a much deeper appreciation for you as well in return.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's so interesting just how few people ask people, what they think, how they're doing, just to have that connection on a deeper level. I think even just listening in itself feels like a skill set a lot of people have not developed. So,
Yeah,
really great. And so, David, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about comparative mysticism. It's a
sure.
term I also haven't really heard much about before. So, I understand that you have a PhD in comparative mysticism from Princeton. Can you tell us about some of the research that you've done on the space, and also maybe what themes have emerged as important?
So I should say I didn't finish my PhD, but I do have 3 degrees in religious studies, and this has been a big interest of mine. So let's take a step back, and when we think of different types of mystical traditions, different types of yogis and meditators, shamans, these types of things. One thing to consider is that really only in the last, let's say, 150 or 200 years have people been able to travel and widely access information. So, for the most part, most of humanity, for thousands of years going back, most people did not travel more than, say, 20 miles away from the place where they were born. And a lot of times, these different types of mystical traditions, they would be very secretive, they would be very localized, um, and um, and so you can think of all of these different types of traditions in a way. Arising independent of one another. There was not necessarily a lot of communication between people. And so you would see situations where one particular person might awaken or attain enlightenment or develop a system of practices. And that system would be passed on from generation to generation within people within a particular community. Now, I like to think of these almost like incubators or accelerators for different types of subconscious transformation, for different types of practices. And there's a way in which all of these different types of practices were happening all over the world at different points in time, at different places around the world. And so when we think of comparative mysticism, there is this opportunity to then say, okay, what are the similarities and differences between all of these different traditions? How can we look at the types of practices that were being developed in Tibet and relate them to different practices in the West or practices in India and so on? We can start looking at the ways in which there may have been some type of cross pollination or sharing of ideas, and we could look at how those things evolved over time. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about comparative mysticism is that you see a pretty consistent view of the subtle body or the energetic body across traditions. And this goes back to some of the stuff that I said earlier about different types of practices and the archetypes. There are really there are three different main energy centers in the body. There would be the heart center. There would be what's in Chinese medicine called the lower dantian, or your core. And then there would be your mind, consisting of your mind and your prefrontal cortex, your pineal gland. There's also seems to be a lot of consistency around this energetic life force that enters the body. So what's in Chinese medicine or in Qigong they would call qi, what in yogic traditions they would call prana. There seems to be a consistent view of this energetic life force that's entering the body, that is constantly sustaining us. And so when we think of comparative mysticism, we can then say, okay, there's a kind of understanding of the subtle body, of the energetic body, or what you might call the quantum body, that is shared and sort of goes across these different traditions. And then you can start to look at, okay, which are the best practices that activate your heart center? Which are the best practices for your body? Which are the best practices for the mind? You can start to then look at very specific benefits of doing these types of practices. And so this is a lot of the thinking and research perspective that went into creating the subconscious fitness system. Was that I did an analysis of comparative mysticism across all of these different traditions. I looked at what are the physiological benefits of these different practices, and then what are the creating a system of practices that you might say are the best of the best, based upon all of this research.
Oh, this is so fascinating, David. So I spent a couple years studying intuition medicine, and I have a master's certification in intuition medicine. And in that
Hmm.
program, we studied all these different energetic systems. And then also after interviewing, close to 150 people on the podcast, I completely agree that it's so interesting how that there's so many consistent themes about the way different types of schools of thought talk about energy, the energetic body and the
Yeah,
systems that they run through. And when I started to notice that, it was kind of mind blowing, the mystics. And I think now we're also starting to see where like a lot of the mystics and mystical traditions are now saying similar things to what science is saying. So it's like
absolutely.
this like massive convergence where it's just that people are using different language or using different words, but a lot of these schools of thought are oftentimes getting to the same place, or they're just giving you different tool sets to get there, or different ways of explaining it.
Yes.
And then I grew up Middle Eastern American, so grew up speaking Arabic, and I was always fascinated by even just language, how language has such a important important kind of way of understanding the world because of the ways that we can express ourselves and even tap into different emotional states using language. So of course,
Yes.
like you had mentioned chi versus prana. I mean, those different traditions also have very different languages and ways of expressing themselves. So fascinating. So what have you kind of discovered as maybe one of the things that you think is the most important takeaway when it comes to the energetic body and managing energy? Because I think a lot of people don't know how to manage their energy, and they oftentimes feel depleted. That was at least what I discovered on this path. I don't know if you felt the same way, but
Hmm.
I felt that as I was moving along this journey that I had way more energy because I knew how to manage my energy and also how to deal with other people's energy.
So, in terms of managing your energy, the first thing that I would say is it's really helpful to learn first some of the very simple practices like the ones that I shared earlier, such as different types of breathing practices or standing meditations. Tapping is EFT tapping is another practice that's very simple. I think it's very helpful for people to do things that they can see immediate benefits from. So these types of 1 to 2 minute practices, you can immediately see a change in your energy. You can immediately see a change in your emotional state. You can experience it physiologically, because when you're able to experience these physiological benefits, you immediately, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I feel like I've cleared a block or whatever. That gets you more excited to learn more in depth practices. So, first, I would say it's helpful. A lot of people think, okay, um, I'm going to learn how to do this now and I'm going to jump right in. And a lot of times they end up putting themselves through a lot of suffering because they try and just go really from doing nothing to being really hardcore. So first, I would recommend, it's helpful to learn things that have just an immediate benefit and get a sense of like you're convincing yourself on a subconscious level. Oh my gosh, I can do this. I can change my energy. I do not have to be constantly reacting to things around me. The second thing that I would say is that there are multiple different types of meditation and different types of practices. My primary practice has involved meditation, but there are a seemingly infinite number of meditation practices. I would recommend that when people are starting, most people start with what's called mindfulness meditation, or anapanasati is the traditional name. That's where you just focus your mindful attention on the breath. I typically do not advise people to start with that. I find that when you go straight to doing concentration practices, it's like you're going from 0 to 1 right away, and it's very hard. It's very difficult to go from being having a super busy mind to all of a sudden trying to concentrate. And so I typically recommend that people do things like meta loving kindness or mantra meditation as a beginning practice. So loving kindness meditation, you start by wishing that you have love towards yourself. So it's, may I experience joy, may I experience peace, may I be free from suffering, and then you go to someone around you, someone that's very close to you, and then eventually you go to all living beings. And experientially, you feel like the practice is about other people, but it's actually really about you. And your mind naturally gravitates towards whatever feels good. And so if your mind is agitated and stressed out, it's actually your mind naturally wants to go towards these really positive, loving thoughts. So there's a way in which meta loving kindness is, it's actually better at training concentration than most concentration practices for beginners. And then a practice like mantra meditation, a lot of people think, oh, mantra is just repeating a sound over and over and over again. But the thing is, the nature of mind. Your mind likes the sound of your own voice, right? You're constantly chattering. You're constantly chattering. And so when you're doing mantra meditation, you're tapping into this aspect of yourself that you always want to listen to your own voice. And mantra meditation is actually another way in which you can learn how to meditate that is much easier than trying to go directly into concentration practices. So in terms of like sort of tips in terms of how to manage your energy, to summarize, first try to do practices that are very simple, that have one you can do in 1 to 2 minutes, so you get a sense of what the benefits are. And then if you're new to meditation or you want to learn meditation, I suggest starting with meta loving kindness or mantra meditation.
Oh yeah, I love that so much. And thank you for the reminder because I used to do the meta loving kindness, and I just remember how good it
Yeah.
feels. So I'm gonna bring that back into my world. David, this is so fascinating. I feel like there's very few people that I think have studied this subject in much depth as you have. It's so amazing to talk to you about all the different layers because I think there's so many different points of view in this space, and it seems like you have been exposed to a lot of them. So I want to understand a little bit more what, kind of has surprised you the most looking back on your journey. You said you started when you were 19. So yeah, I'm curious, what's kind of been most surprising to you? It could be about the practice. It could be about the folks that you've worked with. It could be about humanity.
Honestly, I think the thing that has surprised me so much is discovering this immense amount of possibility within me. So I think that we're born in a world, especially if you're growing up in the U.S., but really anywhere in the world today. There's so much of a focus on instant gratification, on constantly trying to chase after things and feel like you can find happiness in things outside of yourself. And I grew up, really believing that, and had what I would say is a very a kind of limited view of what it means to be human, because I understood it primarily in terms of consuming and buying things, and felt like that was just what I was supposed to do with my life. It's what everyone around me was doing, and I really didn't know any better. And in getting into to learning these practices, discovering the tremendous amount of love and power within my heart, the amount of creativity, the amount of energy, I discovered just this huge universe of possibility inside of me. And it's and as I've gone through these deep transformations over the course of almost 30 years, I've realized that also I don't really, there's nothing outside of myself that I really need. And there's been a tremendous amount of clarity and focus. I have a sense of a deep purpose in my life, and I also feel like when I'm able to stop constantly reacting and really kind of be in my own space, to hold my energetic center and to have that sense of control, it really can feel like a superpower. Because I just, like, when I look at the world now, I see people are just constantly reacting. They're constantly bouncing around like pinballs. They have I would say they have the belief and the illusion that they are free, but you can see that they're doing what I call as outsourcing who you are. Outsourcing who you are is where you're constantly just sharing or liking things that other people's beliefs, and then you're repeating those things. And so much of what people consider to be who they are really just kind of parroting beliefs and opinions and chasing after things that are coming from outside of themselves. And on the one hand, that makes me really sad to see. But at the same time, as I've discovered this tremendous power inside of me, it's the thing that really motivates me. I mean, I get really, I mean, I wake up every day excited to teach these practices. Wake up every day excited to think that I can help someone to have a similar type of transformation in their life. And I would say that this is especially important as we start to enter this world of AI and automation. There's going to be so much change happening outside of ourselves, and the rate of change is going to be exponentially faster than it was when smartphones came. So in the last 20 years, the average attention span has gone from 12 to 8 seconds. So it's literally dropped 30% in 20 years, because people are just constantly externally stimulated. They're constantly overstimulated. And I want to encourage people. This has been my biggest takeaway, is that you don't have to be that way. You don't have to live your life constantly chasing things outside of yourself. When you do that, that makes your happiness conditional, which means you're constantly just going up and down. As soon as you find something that satisfies you, it only satisfies you for a minute or a few days. Then you want something else. Then you want something else. And there's a way in which you can get off that treadmill of just constantly chasing after things, of constantly feeling like your life will have meaning if only you get that new car or that new job or new house or new whatever. And when you're able to step off of that treadmill, there's just an incredible amount of depth and richness that is within you. And I truly believe that there's just a limitless amount of creativity and possibility within each of us. And I think that as the world gets more inundated with automation and AI, the key to success in the future is to focus on the things that are uniquely human. So it's cultivating creativity, it's cultivating empathy, it's cultivating emotional intelligence, it's cultivating focus and courage and all these types of things. And you have the capacity to do that within you. Um, I know that because I've done the work myself. I've seen the transformations in my own life, but also as someone who's been a scholar and who studied these things for over 30 years, for almost 30 years, there's a tremendous amount of research that really demonstrates and proves that this transformation is possible.
Mm. Wow, David, you said a lot of things. So I want to go back. First of all, I love the term outsourcing who you are. I think that's so genius.
Yeah.
I've called it borrowed narrative. Um, but you speak about that you don't need to go outside yourself to make yourself happy. I think so many people, like you said, are looking outside themselves, honestly, to see who they are and to find happiness, and it's such a trap. And so I'm curious, what would you say to someone who is experiencing that? Like, how would you guide them to kind of connecting with that deeper truth within themselves? And then I'll follow up on the AI piece after that.
Well, first, people say you have to start with your why. So, um, I think I would recommend that if someone is feeling disconnected, that they should start with a practice like meta loving kindness or different types of mindfulness practices, depending upon whether they have any experience with meditation or these types of things. I would recommend that they set aside time each day. It's important to, one of the reasons why I call my work subconscious fitness is that we need to train our brain, bodies, and nervous system. We need to train our heart center and our breathing. We need to train all these different subconscious systems. And so I would encourage them to you can train and improve similar to how you would go to a gym and train and improve different aspects of your physical body. And to do that, you need to do things consistently. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, everything David said up to this point, I really agree with that. Now, what am I going to do? Well, start by setting aside some particular time each day to practice. I think one of the things that the modern world has deceived us into believing is that if you understand something with your mind, somehow you are going to be able to implement those changes in your life. There's this phrase, "Words don't cook rice," which I love. Just because you understand something conceptually doesn't mean that you're actually going to make those changes. Um, I would also say that if you're struggling and feeling kind of disconnected from your heart center, I would say that the the dominant way of looking at this in modern society is to look at it as this is about your story of who you are, or to think about it in terms of physiologically. There's the pharmaceutical industry has had such a tremendous amount of impact upon how we view the body, and we view it in these very kind of physiological terms. I would encourage people to do therapy if they need it, but I would also say that I would encourage you to feel like there is much more that you can do for your life than just going to talk to someone maybe once or twice a week or taking a pill. You can start to dedicate different parts of your day to these practices. I would also say that one of the reasons why I designed the subconscious fitness system this way is I encourage. A lot of times people think, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing so many different things. Now I have to practice." It just becomes like another burden, another thing that they have to do. Um, you can do practice in just a couple of minutes. You can do it between activities. There's a lot of different ways in which you can integrate these types of practices into your day, so that it doesn't feel like a burden.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. And I know we're coming to time, but I want to just like briefly talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. You mentioned, the
Yeah.
rise of artificial intelligence, and how can we prepare, maybe personally and professionally, to a world that is going to be one where artificial intelligence is going to continue to rise and take over jobs and perhaps impact our relationships. What would you tell someone, to pay attention to in that realm?
Well, first, I would say that the rise of artificial intelligence and AI is going to completely upend our conceptions of what it means to have a career, and also what it means in terms of education. So a lot of knowledge work, a lot of modern work is pattern recognition, and putting things together and doing different types of analysis. And a lot of knowledge work is now, which means that a lot of that is now things that AI is going to eventually be able to do better than humans. So, as you think about training for the future, then I would say it's not in terms of doing conventional types of education. There is no one particular job that I would say is future proofed. You can't go out and get a degree in some type of field and know that you're going to have a job in 10, 20 years. So when people are thinking, oh my gosh, all this change is going to happen, what can I do? Well, you can do the types of practices that I've been talking about. You can do practices to cultivate more resiliency. There have been studies that have shown that the average brain of a lifelong meditator is 7.5 years younger by the age of 50. That means that they have more gray matter in their brain. They're able to make better decisions. They're able to learn things. They're more resilient. You can do different types of heart center practices to be more emotionally intelligent. You can do practices to cultivate more creativity. What's called prospection, which is thinking about the future, but being sort of having a goal and thinking about the future, but being flexible on how to get there. Um, as you start to think of a world where automation and AI, where you have these machines that can answer any question, that can solve any type of problem, when you think of being in an office environment or a society that's like that, well, the things that make you stand out then are these uniquely human qualities. So, emotional intelligence, empathy, loving kindness, creativity, having courage, um, being able to creatively solve problems, having an understanding of team dynamics. So, there's this kind of inverse then where the things that we used to call soft skills, which were kind of the unessentials, those will be the most important skills to develop in the future. And all the practices that I've been talking about, these are proven ways of doing that have been passed down for thousands of years, that were created by some of the most brilliant and creative minds in the history of humanity, and passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years. And now you have an opportunity to learn all of these practices, to learn how to do them and how to transform all aspects of your life. Which is why I truly believe that there's going to be a huge transformation of consciousness, a kind of great awakening that's going to happen in our lifetimes, because I think there will be a necessity to do these types of practices. There will be a necessity to think about what it means to be human and to reimagine what it means to be human. And that's what makes me really excited about the future. So I would also, the last bit I would say there is, I would say, the world's going to be constantly changing, but that is also a huge opportunity, that as long as you continue to be loving and creative and embrace possibilities and do the types of practices I recommended, as long as you're able to do that, entirely new industries are also going to pop up that we can't even imagine right now. So don't think about the future in terms of trepidation and fear. Think about it as an opportunity to co-create a brand new type of world and really reimagine what it means to be human.
Amazing, amazing, David. I think we all needed to hear that.
Thank you.
So, David, we're coming at time. What do you want to tell our listeners as a main takeaway? And also, where can people find you? Are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you and find your work?
So first, as far as my work, go to flowcoach.co. So there you can find my work on the subconscious fitness system. The subconscious fitness system, it includes, I would say it's the most comprehensive and in-depth collection of transformation practices that's available anywhere at any price. So it includes over 30 hours of teaching videos, over 10 hours of practice instructions. There's over 800 slides. It's incredibly comprehensive and in-depth. It goes into the types of practice that I mentioned. Every practice goes into what I call the energy matter matrix, where I look at the perspective of practices from a traditional mystical perspective, from the energetic perspective. And then I also look at it from a physiological perspective and all the latest scientific research on how these practices can benefit you. So that you can make informed decisions around when to do which practices based upon your needs in any situation. There's also different types of training routines as well. So you can either pick practices based upon the archetypes that I mentioned, or you can pick a training routine. Training routines can be anything from how to develop emotional intelligence, to healing from trauma, to dealing with addiction, to different types of challenges in the workplace. So I would encourage one, you can check out my work there. And then the last takeaway that I would just encourage people to just remember that you are a multidimensional energetic being, and you have all of this love and creativity and possibility within you. And this is one of the most amazing things about being human. And I truly believe that there's all this polarization and negativity and doom and gloom and all that sort of stuff. You turn on the news, that's all that you see. You listen to our political leaders, that's all that you hear. But that's not really what's happening in the world right now. What's happening is we are getting all of this amazing access to all of these automation tools and AI. And there's this huge, infinite amount of possibility of things that you can do, of things that you can become, of businesses and projects that you can create. And we're going to manifest in so many things that we can't even imagine. This is like the point. It's like one of those points in history, like the discovery of fire. This is a huge kind of transition moment. And we are the generation that gets to live through it. We are, what you might call a bridge generation. We're going from this analog world into this entirely new way of being. And so just be excited about the future and be excited about all the amount of limitless possibility that lies inside of you.
Wow. Love it. I love it. I love it. Amazing. I'm so grateful that we had this conversation. I think living in
So am I.
living in possibility, and just reminding everyone that, of course, like there's so much more that we just don't even know is possible. And I think a lot of people live in a conclusion rather than in the possibility of the unknown. And so such a great reminder. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing, David. This is so fun to talk to you and to explore all these worlds. So thank you so much for your time. And we'll also leave a link to your website in the show notes.
Thanks so much for having me, Yasmin. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about the subconscious mind, the power of empathy, and modern day mysticism with David Passiak. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.